Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So I, with the start of this movie felt really good. So I felt that I was gonna like this more than I thought I would. It's weird. It's like I didn't really know anything about this movie before I started it, other than knowing it's the one where like the characters are all being like hunted down by death or whatever. And they all have to die in these like dramatic ways and stuff. That's the whole thing, rather than like someone like trying to kill them. So I kind of didn't really want to watch this one originally, and it is in that sense the way I expected, where they do end up dying in all these crazy ways. And I thought I'd either get like too freaked out, or that would probably be the reason I didn't like it, or maybe I'd get bored. And instead, it was that it got too like existential for me, but also just kind of made my brain hurt trying to like think about it. Because the characters, I do like that they talk about like, oh, which one of them's supposed to die, and the fact that they're still alive and everything, and it kind of forces you to think about that. But also, once the characters figure out that there's like a specific order they're supposed to die, and that they can have it like skip people based on if they prevent someone from dying, and then it ends up turning into like okay, whose turn is it to die now, and all these loopholes and things. Then I feel like it just, especially like the ending and stuff, just got like too confusing to me, where I'm like, okay, can they just have someone die already? But I feel like the strongest point of this movie was actually before anyone started dying. I think up to like the first death and stuff, to me. Because it starts out really strong, where like I don't think you even know it's gonna be like a horror movie, was the vibe I got. Where our main character, his name's Alex, he's like a little superstitious of things already. And he's going on this plane. It's like this trip to Paris with 39 other students, 2 teachers, as part of their like French class or whatever, just like a normal trip basically. And then when he's on the plane, he like notices weird things before they even get on the plane anyway. Like there's this John Denver song that ends up happening over and over through the movie, and it's this whole thing of like John Denver supposedly dying in like a plane crash or something, or just weird little things, but you can like chalk it up to him being like a paranoid person, or like his birthday is the same time as the departure time. And like it's so weird watching this, knowing that they're supposed to like die in this plane crash. I think I kind of vaguely knew about that, because then there's lines that are said of like they see the people on the plane as they're going to their seats, and one of the characters says something of like, the younger the better, because there's like a baby on the plane, and also like a mentally handicapped person on the plane. And they say this line about like, oh, it would take like a fucked up god to take this plane, to like cause them to die and stuff, because there's like more innocent types of people like on the plane, and then knowing later like that the plane explodes and stuff. The dream sequence is kind of cool actually, where I didn't even realize it was a dream sequence at first, the one where Alex gets this like vision that they're all supposed to die, where like the lights flicker and people are screaming and stuff. And because of that, he freaks out, and he gets him and his friends kicked off the plane, and ends up saving their lives. Like literally the plane blows up afterwards. I'm still confused on like how he was even able to have these visions in the first place. I'm surprised the police didn't arrest him immediately, because he does tell them, there's FBI agent characters of like, he had this dream, the plane exploded. I'm surprised they never suspected him of like having a bomb on the plane, or like knowing. I mean, eventually they're like suspicious of him, and he's like hunted down and stuff, but it's less to do with anything with the plane, and more of like he keeps showing up when people are going to die, but he's not causing them to die. He's going there because he knows it's going to happen. He's like trying to save them and stuff. It's also just so weird to watch this movie knowing it came out in 2000, and the whole thing of like the plane and the people that are supposed to die, and the theme of like survivor's guilt and stuff. And then I feel bad for Alex as a character where he's like trying to help, but everyone thinks he's causing these murders. Or not murders, but like these deaths and stuff. And his teacher ends up being afraid of him, and everyone keeps getting mad at Alex, even though he did save like 6 people from being killed on that plane and stuff. But just the way the characters react to having survived that, and how they treat Alex, I think, after the plane incident, I think is probably the most interesting thing to me in this movie, of how they all deal with it. Like, there's a character named Carter, and he hates Alex, even though Alex, saved them from being on that plane and stuff. And then eventually Carter gets like a bit suicidal, where he wants like a sense of control and is trying to find his own way to die, but like at the cost of everyone else. Or like the only person that supports him is this girl named Clear. I thought her name was Claire because I was mishearing it, but I did notice the subtitles were saying Clear. Apparently her name's Clear Rivers, which I just find that really funny. But I have to remember to change that with my notes because I kept writing it as Claire. I felt kind of bad for her though. I think she's one of the only ones that actually gets like a proper backstory of like her parents not really caring about her and stuff, and things to do with her father. But there's this part where all the parents and stuff show up for the kids at the airport after finding out that they survived the not getting on the plane and stuff, but hers are the only ones that like don't show up. I felt kind of bad for her. I was just thinking, and I wrote about it in my notes, like, emotionally, what do you even do with not being on a crashed plane? Do you just have survivor's guilt for the rest of your life? Especially because it was supposed to be like a fun trip to Paris as part of their senior year in their French class, and they'd probably be on that plane, being so excited for that trip and stuff, and then having the plane explode. And it does end up getting explained of like, there was some kind of electrical thing that would have activated from like certain seats, so it was like very specific that these characters were supposed to die on that plane and stuff. And then it's like about half an hour into the movie that like you finally get the first death and the music gets a little more scary. Normally that would kind of bother me. I feel like it would depend on the movie. But I actually don't mind that a lot of the movie is like the build up to like them, it's kind of slow at first of like them getting on the plane, Alex being kind of paranoid, their reactions, and like the funerals and everything after the plane crash. The movie really like takes its time with it, and I'm glad because it's like such a serious thing, and that it immediately doesn't just go to like, okay, they're gonna just start dying now after surviving this plane crash and stuff. Or I guess that's like the best way to put it. Like, I know they're not on the plane, but and I do think the way they talk about death is interesting. Sometimes they talk about it as if it's like a person, but also as like a thing of like, it comes for us all kind of a vibe. But death's almost personified just a little in the fact that there's like this weird shadow that shows up. It's like this shadow hallucination thing. Like right before someone's going to die, and there is like little hints of things. Like sometimes Alex will get a vision of something, and he just knows that someone's gonna die. And the way they die is like really interesting. It varies between where it gets more aggressive throughout the movie, of like it's either something small or like they die in their house, or it gets like kind of crazy at the end. Part of the other reason I actually wanted to watch this movie was I had played the dating sim Date Everything. It's the one where you date the furniture in your house, and I remember reading fanfics where it was put into the world of like Final Destination, so I just assumed there was going to be like a lot more of like furniture related or like dying in your house from some kind of wacky object related thing type of deaths in this movie, and there's not, but I'm kind of glad. Like the first death, and it's kind of interesting too, where you keep seeing these dangerous things and you assume like, oh, this person's gonna cut themselves or get hit by a bus or burned or whatever, and instead it ends up being the cause of something else. It's like this really weird domino effect, and sometimes it just kind of ends up being bullshit a little bit. And then it causes something else to actually kill them instead, but the characters don't realize it. until it's too late. And it's such a like natural but unnatural kind of thing where it's like it's natural in the sense of like there's water on the floor and then oh your mug cracks and it gets liquid on your computer and it explodes or whatever. Like these are things that can happen, but then the domino effect from there just gets crazier and crazier where it's like oh okay it would never get probably this insane or whatever. Like the first death is one of the characters. He cuts himself while shaving and you assume like he's gonna bleed out or something's gonna happen, and instead there's water from this leaky toilet and he slips on it and he gets caught in the bathroom by this string thing and it chokes him. Though I don't know why his eyes literally start turning red with like blood or something as he's getting choked by this string thing. I feel like that doesn't really make sense. And then the water, the puddle actually sinks back into the toilet and stuff. So that's like a death is like purposely trying to kill you thing. And then Claire's kind of a confusing character too, where she's kind of like the secondary main character, where she's never talked to Alex before the like plane incident or anything, but they kind of grow closer throughout the movie. But she mentions about being able to somehow feel his visions of like the plane crash but without being able to see them. It's kind of weird. What else? I didn't know that Tony Todd was in this. That was kind of cool because I just watched Candyman for the first time. But he plays kind of a similar character in the sense of like the way he talks about death and stuff. And it's like a very short, it's like one scene that he's in where he's this mortician at the morgue. The characters go to try to look at the body of like the first of them that like dies and stuff. It did scare me for a minute though when he's introduced and he grabs a pair of scissors and you hear this metal sound. I kept thinking about the hook that his character has in the other movie. But he talks about how like death controls everything, and he kind of gives them hints of stuff of like this idea of death designing ways that you die. It's just referred to as like the design in the movie for the most part, where he's saying stuff of like you need to pay attention to what the design is, and you can like basically cheat death if you're like paying close enough attention. But he also explains it as like, oh yeah, we'll all die eventually, and he kind of introduces this idea of like death itself as if it was like some kind of entity is like purposely trying to kill you because you didn't die in that plane crash. And his character isn't like evil or anything. I actually almost assumed at first he was going to be the personification of death or something in a way, especially because when he says bye the characters, he says I'll see you soon, as if he knows they're going to die soon. But he does his job as the mortician and he gives them helpful advice. He's just kind of morbid. But yeah, that was a cool part of the movie. Nice to see him again in something. What else? I also heard he shows up in the sequels too, but I'm not gonna watch the sequels. I'm mostly just trying to watch like whatever the first movie is in a lot of these kinds of like horror franchises and stuff. But I do think it's cool of having the plot being like figuring out how to cheat death and stuff, especially because Alex ends up having this seating chart from the plane, and it ends up being vital to figuring out like who's next and stuff. I think the music kind of throws me off with this movie. There's a lot of just songs with lyrics and stuff that just feel like a bit too peppy for a movie where people are dying and stuff. And some of the deaths, they're interesting, where some of them are like very slow and it's like this domino effect type thing, and then there's others where someone suddenly just dies. Like there's this blonde girl and she just suddenly gets hit by a bus and then that's it and she died. Like I know it's in real life too that death can come like suddenly and stuff, but just the way it's again kind of portrayed as almost like an entity that's stalking them. I thought all of the deaths for the characters were going to be like kind of long or whatever. I thought the FBI agents were going to have more of a role. They kind of just like follow around Alex and stuff, and that's kind of about it. Like he is on the run a little bit throughout some of the movie. The teacher dying was kind of when I was getting a bit tired of the deaths, where hers is the one where there's this mug and it breaks a little bit and it leaks on her computer and it explodes, and I'm like, okay, that seems fine. But then her tea kettle, something happens with it and it causes part of the house to end up on fire. And then it gets a little ridiculous where she's trying to grab a towel and it causes a knife to fall on her. Like, the objects are just set in a way where it's like, it really is that kind of domino effect of these things are just going to keep happening until the house ends up exploding. And it's just like, what? That's part of the reason, even though I find the premise of this interesting, of why, and I get that's the whole point of this series, is like the characters are supposed to die in these like crazy ways and whatever, and you expect that. But it's why I just wouldn't be able to stand probably watching the sequels and stuff of like, it's just, I feel like I would probably get frustrated with it. The scene that was one of the scenes that was actually kind of scary to me, and it wasn't even one where someone gets killed, was when the characters, they're with this guy named Carter, and he's one of the survivors of the plane crash. You know, they're all like together or something of whoever's left, and he wants a sense of control because he says it as like, I decide how I live, I decide how I die. So he drives as carelessly as possible. Like, he basically has like a death wish at this point because he's so afraid, but he won't admit he's afraid. And I would be pissed if my friend had a death wish and forced me along, where he does not let his friends out of the car and is going to force them to die with him. And then Alex has this vision of a train, and Carter purposely puts them on a railway track with an incoming train. And then when he finally kind of snaps out of it and realizes he doesn't want to die, and he tries to get out of the car stops working, and he's not able to get out by himself. Like, his friends were able to get out and stuff. I think it's probably because, like, he's supposed to be the next one to die, but also I like to think of it like he was trying to screw up Death's design plan by trying to choose how he dies, and Death is basically just like, hey, you want to die so badly, then and fuck with my plan, then you're just gonna, like, die now. You don't get a choice. But then Alex is able to pull him out on time from getting hit by the train, and then it gets kind of silly where there's this piece of metal from when the car, it's like this stray piece of metal from when the car gets blasted to death by the train, and of course it ends up hitting this other guy and decapitates him. And it's basically this thing of like, if Alex saves someone from, because he's able to see Death's design or whatever of like how they're probably going to die, then Death just picks someone else to die. It's like this concept of like, it skips to the next person based on the seating chart or whatever. And then Alex locks himself in his room and baby proofs the house to try not to die because he knows he's next. I think it would have been interesting if it did follow through with that, of like a good chunk of the movie being like him. How long would he be able to avoid death or whatever? But then he figures out, like, Claire's supposed to be next. He goes to try to save her, and he ends up grabbing this electrical cable where he should have, like, died or something, where she gets trapped in this car and he saves her. And then it's revealed that he survived and he's, like, fine. And then Death just, like, leaves them all alone for, like, 6 months and doesn't try to kill them again. It's kind of funny, actually, because then they decide to celebrate by getting on a plane and going to France like they were supposed to. And it's like, after going through all that shit and like Death trying to kill you but also surviving that plane crash, I'm like, and I'm not trying to say this of like, oh, they're stupid, are they trying to get killed in the plane again, but more of just, I don't get it, of like, why would you decide to get back on another plane, you know? And they don't die on the plane, they do make it to France, but then Alex starts mentioning of like, oh, hey, I still haven't died yet, or whatever, and Carter kind of believes he's, like, immortal or something because Alex is supposed to die next, so then he saves Alex from dying, and then Carter dies, and it's this bullshit of, like, a bus almost hits one of them, and then it causes this giant metal sign to fall, and it swings back and it kills Carter, and then it goes to the credits. So I guess Alex and Claire get to survive. It feels like one of those things like at the end of a horror movie where it's like, okay, we're gonna have like one last sudden death or whatever, and normally I'm fine with that, but just the way it happens here where the characters are talking about the the seating chart, and it's almost like a tempting fate thing. And that's the reason I believe that Carter dies or whatever. Not even really as a way to like tie up loose ends. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, the way the death design stuff of like trying to kill them off is kind of cool. And it's just interesting where there isn't really like a serial killer or whatever that's like going around killing them, but you can kind of treat death in that sense of that they're like being targeted and stuff, and it gives a more creative way of like for them to die and stuff, this like domino effect thing. And I do actually really like the concept for a horror movie of like, oh, you're all supposed to die on this plane and you don't, so death is like hunting you down to make sure that you die. I think is like a really creative concept actually. It's just, I don't know, I just wasn't really feeling it and stuff, and it kind of just made me more like frustrated than anything. And then it just gets kind of like confusing, and I mean I wasn't really expecting the existentialism of it either, of like where it just kind of bummed me out for a while, and I had to like stop watching and like take a break for like an hour, and then I went back to the movie where it's like out of everything, that was the thing that ended up being too much for me, of like the characters talking about how like we should have died, and the way they handle like how they feel about surviving the crash and stuff. But I mean that's also good, but it just ended up kind of feeling like too much. I think especially when it came to the teacher and her added guilt of how she was supposed to be on the plane, she switched places with another teacher and she told him to get back on the plane, and then the plane crashed, and that's the reason she's like so specifically pissed off at Alice and not Alice, Alex, and is like afraid of him and stuff, as she has that kind of added weight. Like she literally like calls the FBI to come get Alex when he's hanging around and trying to figure out if she's gonna like die or not or something. Anyway, there's like 6 more of these and stuff. I'm not gonna watch them. That's what I'm noticing with a lot of these, like with Nightmare on Elm Street as well, where there's like just 5 or 6 sequels and stuff. But I don't know, I'm good with just watching like the first installment of all of these, just to kind of get a taste, see what I like and stuff. But yeah, this one was all right. I think it had some interesting concepts. I just got kind of tired of it by the end, but it is also at the same time kind of what I expected. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, bye bye.